Welcome, everyone. It's really great to have you all here today. It's a really important day for us, and you might have seen recent headlines concerning behavior, school policies, and some schools, especially academies. Schools should really be a place to nurture young people's mental health and well-being, not a place for exclusion, shaming, and psychological distress. By the time young people leave secondary schools, they should be able to enter the adult world with pride, confidence, and self-esteem. We have a great panel today, and without further ado, we're going to start with our keynote speaker today, Diane Abbott, who has worked really hard on this topic and has brought a lot of attention to the impact it has, these behavior policies and exclusions on children and young people, especially SEND and from global majorities. Diane, welcome to this space. We're really grateful to have you here today.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, and congratulations to the organisers for putting together such an important event. I've been involved in the fight for educational equality since the 1990s, when I launched an initiative called London Schools and the Black Child. Today, we're here to talk about an issue which is deeply personal to me and to so many in our community, the mental health of our young people, and how school exclusions are marginalising them and failing them. The data is clear, the stories are heartbreaking, and in my 37 years as a Member of Parliament, it doesn't, very sadly, look as if too much has changed. Let's start with the facts. According to the Race, Poverty and School Exclusions in London report by Just for Kids, school exclusions in London are not just a simple disciplinary issue, they are a social justice issue. Black students are disproportionately excluded and have been for many years. In London, Black Caribbean students are 3.5 times more likely to be permanently excluded than white students. This is not just a stat, it's a reflection, very sadly, of systematic bias and inequality. Poverty also plays a big role. That report shows that pupils who receive free school meals are 5 times more likely to be permanently excluded. Poverty and exclusion and mental health issues are inextricably linked, and we cannot address one without addressing the other. And these numbers are not abstract. They represent real children in Hackney and in all our communities who are being pushed to the margins of our education system. And there's a human cost. School exclusions do not just disrupt education, they devastate mental health. Being excluded from school is a deeply isolating experience. It sends a message to young people that they don't belong, that they're not valued. That can lead to feelings of shame, anger, and hopelessness. Research shows that excluded children are 4 times more likely to experience mental health problems than the generality of children. Excluded children are more likely to be drawn into the criminal justice system. A Director General of the Prison Service once said, on the day you exclude a child from school, you might as well give them a date and time to turn up at prison. That, sadly, is the pathway from school exclusions to prison. In Hackney, I've seen firsthand how exclusion tears apart family and communities. It's not just a case of missing a few weeks of school, it's about losing a sense of purpose, belonging, and hope. But this isn't just about the individual student. It is about systematic failure. There's a racial bias in exclusion decisions, and the figures reveal that. All too often, particularly with all the cuts, schools are under-resourced to deal with the complex needs of their students. So Instead of providing counselling, mentoring, or special educational support, they resort to exclusion as a quick fix. There's an accountability gap as well. So we need to deal with these issues head on. So what could we do? We can invest in early intervention. We can address racial bias. We and other organisations in the community, like the local authority, can do whatever we can to tackle poverty. We should amend exclusion policies. They should be a last resort, not the first thing that teachers resort to. In closing, I want to leave you with this thought. Exclusion is not just a school issue, it's a societal issue. It's about who we value, who we support, and who we leave behind. As politicians, activists, educators, and community leaders, we have the power to change this. Let us all work together to build a system that lifts up every child, no matter their background or challenges. Let's fight for mental health support, for racial justice, and for a future where no child is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. That has been really, really important to hear. There are some comments that I've made, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring some questions from the audience that we have here today. You said really powerful truth in there that unfortunately we know, a lot of us know, that you have been a very strong voice, but change hasn't yet happened. You talk about how school exclusion should change. What do you think is next for us now, especially that we have a school and well-being bill being brought in with the new government? Do you think there is an opportunity for change there, Diane?
I think change has to happen at a local level. I think we have to be campaigning with our local authorities, with our local education committees, to say that it needs to be a priority to change policy on exclusions. And I know that's difficult with so many academies, but we still have to try. I think it has to be done on a local level. I think individual schools have the power to change policy on schools exclusions and not have them an easy, quick fix to get a troublesome child out of the classroom, but has them as the very last resort, even if that means having special events or special conferences for teachers, perhaps supported by the trade union or other organisations, to talk about exclusions and how teachers can take responsibility for how they use them and why they use them.
There has been, Diane, and you know this probably better than anyone else because you've been pushing on this. There's been a lot of protection as well on academies on how local authorities haven't been able to create this change. And there is, of course, another point that we want to bring is about, so why do you think this has been the case, that academies have not, or local authorities have not been able to make that change with academies? And also, what is the racial bias perhaps in the school? Why do you think that is, Diane?
Well, we all know that academies are not directly responsible to their local borough council, but it's possible for the borough council, the local council, to give advice, to try and bring teachers together. As I say, with the support of their trade union, it ought to be possible to bring teachers together to talk about these issues. You're asking me why things haven't changed. I think it's with the academies and the emphasis on outturns, the emphasis on what grades people get, the emphasis on how well, in a kind of technical sense, the children are doing. It's too easy to lose sight of what's happening to marginalised children within the school system. So even though academies can't be directly controlled by the local councils shouldn't just shrug off the issue of exclusions, because it's a very real issue in terms of outturns, in terms of behavioural issues. Local councils need to try and give advice and to talk and work with schools, even if they are academies.
Diane, that really gives a good context as to what has been the struggle to date in terms of what local authorities have been able to do, or when you say they shouldn't shrug off, and as it is the campaign of many at the moment, and that's why there's been so much attention. The Labour Party is now finally in government. Do you think they can make change on this issue?
At the current time, education, the Secretary of State for Education is not talking about exclusion. She's not really talking about what's happening to the diverse school community, which is very sad, because Secretary of State has the power to direct schools, including to try and work with academies. So as I say, we really do have to work at a grassroots level and hope that with more grassroots activities and MPs willing to speak up on the issue in Parliament, we can get the Secretary of State to look at an issue which, to my knowledge, she's not looked at before: what is happening with school exclusions.
Diane, I know that we have a bit of a shorter time today with you because you're going to a very important event very soon. We have just a couple of more questions, if that's okay, that I believe, John, I think people are putting, people from the audience very kindly already are putting comments and also questions. Before we go into a couple of more questions, Diane, before you go, we want to check with you, what do you think perhaps more broadly we should be able to do, we should be doing to create emotionally healthy schools?
Well, emotionally healthy schools are all about the teachers. They're all about the support outside of lessons that are given to children. And it's also about working with parents where we can.
There are some, in fact, when you talk about parents, there are people that have tried to campaign quite a number of years on this, and some of them have been supported by you, some of them have come to speak, a number of grassroots organizations. What do you think, just almost like a message for that grassroots that you mentioned, what do you think will be the powerful thing that grassroots can do? What can the sort of the everyday person do to make change for this, Diane, to see the end of these draconian policies in the schools?
I think it's very important that parents come together, because I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just me that's worried, it's just me that's concerned. And also that people are careful that when they come together, it's a broad cross-section of parents, not just the more confident, the more middle-class parents, to be frank. So in bringing parents together, you have to understand or try to have a really diverse group of parents that reflect the diversity in the school.
I think we have, thanks, Diane. I think we have a few more. John, do we have more questions, I believe, and comments that we have for Diane?
Yeah. Well, there's a theme around funding as well in the chat about schools needing more funding to do better, and whether there's any hope that that might be possible.
I've not heard anything to say that at this time my government is going to give more money to schools. And that's very, very sad indeed. But in fact, at this time, we're having to fight against cuts in welfare and disability benefits. So it's a very difficult situation. And like I said, I don't think the Secretary of State, I mean, she has much experience of schools in inner city London, to be honest, and of the realities of schools in inner city London. And I think at a local level, we have to come together. And even at a London-wide level, we need to come together. As I said earlier in my remarks, for some years I ran an initiative called London Schools and the Black Child, and we got hundreds of parents from all over London and some from outside of London together to talk about these issues. I think one year we had maybe 2,000 parents. So it's about bringing parents together on a local level, bringing parents together on a London-wide level, but also to contacting your local MPs, because they will also potentially be lobbyists of the Secretary of State for Education.
Thank you, Dan. 2,000 parents, that's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, and so important. I noticed some themes, if it's all right to catch that, Claudia. There was also some questions around Ofsted and whether there's any capacity to influence how Ofsted might kind of reflect on what's happening in exclusions, and especially around racial biases with exclusions.
Well, Ofsted can be quite problematic. We have got rid of the kind of one-word verdicts on schools, which is a step forward. I think that it's important that Ofsted pay more attention to the question of exclusions and what's happening about race, because race in education has been an issue for decades and decades, and increasingly diverse groups of children are represented in the school system, but it's diverse groups of children who are being failed. At this point, I'd be happy to write to the head of Ofsted about this issue, to find out what's being done, to find out what they're formally doing, and then we can go from there.
That sounds like a great next step, Diane. Yeah, like moving to action, and yeah, fantastic. I notice we've got a couple of hands up, so maybe if it's all right with you, Dan, we could take a question on the microphone. Would that be all right? And,
Yep.
yeah, Laura, could we come to you next? I'm mindful of the time. We've just got about 6 or 7 minutes, so we just can get a couple of questions. Thank you, Laura. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Sorry, this is something I feel so passionate about, and I've spent like my whole career in, and I think there's so many different complex elements that you're speaking to, but I wondered if you'd speak to power, because I think what you spoke to about the shame of being excluded happens way before the formal exclusions happen, and I think there just is so little in teacher training and in the pressures of what teachers are told they need to be doing to show they're performing, that address relationships and the dynamics of relationships and child development and all this really important stuff that actually could get to the root of racial bias, class bias, you know, what happens to the adults in response to challenging behaviour and why they then might abuse their power. But we just don't have that focus coming from the pressure, like the people that it needs to be centred more by everybody, I think. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to the power around all that.
Well, Ofsted certainly has a role in that. And I do think parents coming together as parents and working together and sharing experiences is very important, because you will find parents who are completely focused on academic outturns and will jettison everything for that. And I think we need to encourage parents to work together as a group of parents who are trying, yes, to, you know, maintain academic outcomes and improve them, but also trying to deal with the whole diversity of children and give them support. I know I keep going on about what people can do locally, but having worked in education, you know, worked in trying to organise parents, I'm very certain in the end it's what parents can do locally, and moving out from that, trying to influence people with power, as you say, that will make a difference. You can't do anything from the centre if parents locally are not tuned into it.
Sorry, Laura, we're just going to go to the next question. Thank you so much for your question. I'm just so mindful of time. Omar, let's hear from you quickly. And then Dan, we want to make sure you can get off to your next event.
I'll
Omar,
be
do you
really
have
quick. Thanks,
a
John.
truncated question? Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks, Diana. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed what you were saying. It was really passionate. And I was just thinking about the exclusion rates, and just in between that idea of people being excluded, do you think there would be a possibility to write to Ofsted that there could be a bit of a timeout, or there could be an option where disruptive pupils who've got neurodiverse conditions can just maybe have 10 minutes out of the classroom with a support worker, and they're able to go back into the classroom when they regulate their emotions? Do you think that could be an idea, what you could put forward to Ofsted, rather than a complete exclusion of the child?
No, I think that's a very good idea, and it's what we're talking about, which is not using exclusions as a first resort. I can certainly, in writing to Ofsted, raise that issue. Is there kind of an intermediate situation between a child whose behaviour is troublesome and actually excluding the child?
Thank you, Omar. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for your response. I think we wanted just to take a few minutes before you need to go, Dan. I think, Claudia, you wanted to say just a little bit about the campaign that's emerging, I guess, and some of those themes. And yeah.
Thank you, John. Diane, I think the messages that you share with us today are very powerful, and sometimes we don't know. And I think that it's fair to say that now, myself as a counselor, I'm myself a mental health therapist and a former youth worker, I've known of these issues for over a decade when I supported young people who were at risk of exclusions in East London. But often people don't know the severity of the situation, so it's really powerful to hear it from you. We, as you know, we're launching a campaign where we're making a call for emotionally healthy and nurturing schools in the UK, which we hope we count with your support and your very strong voice on the topic, Diane. I think Laura will come in just to give us a quick response I think she wanted to share with you, and then we'd like to hear from you, Diane, as your last message before you head to your next event.
So we're just going back to Laura, is that right?
Sorry, I just wanted to say, as well as being a professional in schools and in CAMS and working in exclusions, I also am a parent with a child with SEND needs. And I think whilst I completely agree with you about the collective power of parents, it has to be also understood that sometimes parents are so isolated and no one's listening, and it's exhausting. And just the impact on myself with huge amounts of experience and absolutely being able to challenge the system, I still have felt broken at times, and the impact it's had on my husband, my son's brother, like this is huge. So whilst I agree with that in principle, we've also got to support parents to do that, because professionals they should be the ones that are taking the main responsibility, because it's their system that's broken.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Laura. What we're going to do for people that are staying in for the rest of the conference, we are having two panels, and the next panel after this introduction will be talking about the data, what parents, the support that they need, the solutions and potential alternatives that we're going to bring. Diane, just as a last message before you go, thank you so much. We still got a lot of work to do. There is momentum, there is opportunities. We finally have, there is a finally Labour government, and you are right in the middle of where change can happen. What's your last message for us today, Diane, before you go?
My message is that our children are our future, that every child should be seen as valuable, and we need to work together to improve the lives and the outcomes and the happiness of all our children.
Wonderful. Thanks, Diane, and thanks for your time today. And we look forward to working with you with our campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.